I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. And earlier this year, State Senator Rachel May introduced legislation designed to lay down clear and meaningful consumer privacy protections for New Yorkers living with internet-connected home camera devices, including what happens with the footage that is collected. And the Syracuse Democrat, who chairs her chamber's Committee on Consumer Protections, joins us to discuss her Camera Privacy Act. Thanks for making the time, Senator.
My pleasure.
So you're looking to create some consumer protections for so-called internet-connected or networked cameras. What sort of recording devices do you have in mind with this type of legislation? And why is there a need for creating a framework of consumer protections?
We are really targeting things like the Ring cameras and the Nest cameras that people have at their doors, that are able to record who's come to your door. And they also are recording what's going on around your door, if people are stealing your packages or whatever. But a lot of them have the option of being connected to the cloud and actually interconnected to each other. And so we've seen with things like the issue with Savannah Guthrie's mom, for example, that they're trying to track all the different cameras in the area to see if anybody captured any information about it. So it can be a very useful tool, but a lot of people feel like they want more control over what happens with anything that they are recording on their property.
And in terms of the rules that you want to put in place, what are the guardrails? And are they primarily about protecting the person who owns the camera, or is it about the person who might inadvertently, because you're walking on the street or maybe you delivered a package, are appearing on the cameras?
Yeah, so this legislation really is about the people who own the cameras because it's harder to protect kind of random passersby in a way, but to make sure that before the manufacturer connects you into some kind of a surveillance system, that you have the opportunity to approve that or disapprove that. And that one, it gained some notoriety during the Super Bowl. I don't know if you saw the ad, but there was a Ring ad that showed people finding their lost dog by tapping into a lot of other people's Ring camera footage, and people started feeling like, okay, it's one thing to be looking for a lost dog, but there's something creepy about this if all this information is readily available like that. So it was more the people who have the cameras that they could limit whether it can be used in this way or not.
Well, it's one thing to have the authority to say, yes, you can use this information or you can store this information in some way. It's another thing to have, say, informed consent over that type of decision. Because I know, I'll use an I statement, I just typically go through, accept, whatever, when I'm setting up a device or maybe there's an update. What does a meaningful decision in this space look like? And do you have to require the companies spell out exactly what they're looking to do in plain English?
Yeah, so remember, these are often devices that somebody installs for you,
Mm-hmm.
or there's more than just buying it. There's a process to getting them set up, and what our bill does is require that at the point of sale, you have to be informed about storage practices, transmission, whatever coordinated features there are, and whether the company is retaining your data or not, and what the policies are on that. And then you can opt in or opt out. And we did specify a plain language explanation of what those data practices are before the camera is enabled.
And what about how that data might be used by the companies that are collecting it in those cases where they have consent? Are you setting any guardrails for how they can use that data? For example, can they sell it to someone else who, for whatever reason, thinks that they can monetize that in a meaningful way?
So right now, the companies can do that. Honestly, they can share the information. They can use it for AI purposes. They can use it for all kinds of things. And we're just saying that has to be an opt-in, that the consumer in New York has to have the right to decide whether that's going to happen. It is the case, and it will continue to be the case, that law enforcement could require, with a warrant, they could demand this footage for various reasons of investigations, but they'd have to have a warrant to do that.
So the bill memorandum makes the case that this effort is not about banning practices. It's not supposed to halt innovation. What do you see as, I guess, the benefit of something like this? And why not put a pause on something like this? Why not say, I do think this is kind of Orwellian in nature, and maybe it's not what we want in our state?
You mean to stop the cameras altogether?
Sure, or prevent the collection of the data, or just have a stronger lockdown. Because, like you've said, this is not about restricting activities. It's about making sure the people who are impacted know what they're getting into.
Right. I think that's enough. I mean, I do think these have become very common devices in people's lives, and people use them for security. I do a lot of going door to door, and I ring these doorbells constantly. And, sometimes you get a chance to talk to the person and they're at work, but they can monitor who's at their door, and you can have a conversation with them, and they can say, whatever, no, I will never vote for you, or yes. I'm happy to sign your petition, but you'll have to come back at a certain time, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of people feel a lot more security about it, knowing that they can find out who's at their door. So, and they can only do that because those are connected somehow to remote devices, probably through the cloud. So I think just saying, no, we don't want this to be an option for people would dramatically reduce the value for a lot of people of these items. It's more this coordinated surveillance that they are being used for, where there's 100 of these devices in a neighborhood, and they can be monitored by someone outside the neighborhood who's checking for something. Maybe that's they're checking for something good, but maybe it's not what people want. They're typically, people want these because they really want control over what's happening at their homes, not because they want to just provide information to anybody about it.
Well, we've been having this conversation through the lens of the person who decides to install and own one of these cameras. And as you pointed out, the rights of the individual or individuals who are being captured on film is a lot murkier. But do you think that is an area that needs to be explored? Because as you point out, in some cases, like if you're a politician collecting signatures, you're going up to someone's doorstep, and I imagine there is a certain amount of privacy that you're giving up by doing that. But for the person who's walking on a sidewalk or even in the street, do they have an expectation that they aren't going to be filmed? And I mean, is that something that we should be at least talking about in the future?
I like that question. I do think maybe there is, there should be a distance restriction on these, so that it isn't just capturing ordinary life going by on the street. But I don't know enough about the technology to know how you would do that, or what would be entailed in that. And that's obviously a broader question. I do think we're in a moment when people are very alert to surveillance that's going on, whether it is, about when you're shopping in a store, or whether it is ICE trying to identify people who might be immigrants that they could detain. And so I do agree with you that this should be part of a bigger conversation, but this bill isn't that.
Well, before I let you go, let's take a hard left turn and talk about a bill that you carry that has generated a lot of interest, but it's possible that some of that interest stems from a misunderstanding about how your bill would actually be applied if it became law. And this has to do with forests and energy, and moving energy from one part of the state to another. So can you talk about this bill that has gotten so much attention?
Absolutely, yeah. It's Senate Bill 4408. It was inspired by some projects for solar and wind energy that were in relatively remote locations. And the only efficient way that they could connect to the grid was if they could have a transmission line across some piece of state reforestation land. State reforestation lands are lands that the state manages. They used to be farms, or they used to be logging tracts, that kind of thing. And the state manages them to regrow trees, but also for all kinds of uses, from recreation and watershed protection to oil and gas development, frankly. So they are working lands. They've got roads. They've got utility lines, they've got fire lanes and ski trails and all kinds of things through them. And it didn't seem to me that the idea that you could put a green energy transmission line through them was too big an intervention in these. But one of my colleagues debated the bill and suggested that all I wanted to do was clear cut the forests and just blanket them with solar panels, which is not what's in the bill. But somehow that's gotten out on the internet, and we're getting a lot of calls and reporters asking about this. And so I'm eager to set the record straight and say this is really about just making it easier to connect green energy to the grid.
And given your track record with endorsements from the New York League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, I have to imagine people should, I don't know, give you a little bit of credibility, or maybe trust you a little bit when it comes to your interest in preserving the environment.
I have a degree from SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and probably am the most active proponent of forest health and sustainable forestry in the state legislature. So yeah, absolutely. I do. It is a little bit funny that I'm being accused of these things, but people are genuinely scared about it. And green energy is in the crosshairs of people who support the fossil fuel industry. But if we want to protect our forests, we have to shift away from fossil fuels, because they're the ones that are causing the droughts and the wildfires and the acid rain and invasion of really damaging pests and big storms and floods and all of the things that are really a threat to our forests. So I'm proud of this bill. It's just frustrating that so much misinformation is out there about it.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senate Consumer Protection Committee Chair Rachel May. She is a Syracuse Democrat. Senator, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.